Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel JK the Vlog Canada. I hope you guys are doing well. Well, if you're looking to submit a Canadian citizenship application in 2024, make sure you watch this video from the start till the end. There are some errors and mistakes. So basically in today's video, we are going to talk about some common errors and mistakes and how to avoid these errors and mistakes in your citizenship application. Because if you do make these errors and mistakes in your citizenship application, eventually your application could be refused or rejected. So basically this video, it's all about how to avoid those errors. And we're also going to discuss the eligibility criteria in detail. And we will also be discussing about the mandatory documents, how to make sure that you are submitting the right applicable documents when you submit your citizenship application. Okay, so make sure you watch this video from the start till the end. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. And also, just to let you know, I'm not a registered RCIC consultant. Based on my own research and experience, I'm delivering this video to you. So I have made several videos about Canadian citizenship application process. The first video I made a few months ago, and more than 10,000 people have watched that video. And that video talks about how to apply for a Canadian citizenship online, how to fill out the application, and what documents are required, and how to upload the documents, how to pay the fee. Okay. Now, the second video I made was about the Canadian citizenship test. That's another important video. Again, more than 12,000 people have watched that video, and that has helped or assisted thousands of people. Okay, so make sure if you're looking for help on how to prepare yourself for Canadian citizenship test, go ahead and check that video. The last video I made was all about how to prepare yourself for Canadian citizenship oath online. So basically, oath is actually the last step before you actually become a Canadian citizenship. You need to take an oath, right? So all these videos have helped thousands of people. So I will add the link in the description as well. So make sure you go ahead and check that video. Now let me go ahead and share my screen so that I can explain you about those common errors and mistakes. All right, guys, as you can see on my screen, this is the official website of the Government of Canada. Now, the Canadian citizenship application could be refused for different reasons, okay? Based on my experience, I'm going to be talking about a few different scenarios and how you can ensure that your application is complete and how you can ensure that, like you're submitting it correctly and to ensure that, your application is not being refused or rejected, okay? Now, the first important thing is to understand the eligibility criteria correctly, because if you don't meet the criteria and you go and submit your application could be refused. Now, the first thing is, as you can see on the screen, that you must be a permanent resident. You've lived in Canada for 3 out of the last 5 years. You file your tax if you need to, prove your language skill, pass a citizenship test, take the oath of citizenship. So these are the main important criterias that you must meet before IRCC or the Government of Canada approve your citizenship application. Okay. Now, PR status, I'm 100% sure that you guys would know that you can only apply for citizenship if you are PR prior to submitting an application, if you have a permanent resident status here in Canada. Now, most of the refusals I've seen, it's because of not meeting this physical presence criteria. So just to give you an idea, this is very important to understand. There's always a calculator available. You can always click on this link. I will try to add this link in the description as well. See, the criteria is that you must have lived for 1,095 days, and this is actually a physical presence, okay? It's not actually the total time, for example. So just put it this way. For example, you entered Canada, let's assume, on January the 1st, 2024, okay? Now, and you don't, for example, and you don't leave Canada for next 3 years, and you're basically planning to live Canada for another 3 years, and you're not going outside. Then each day you live in Canada, that will be counted as one day, okay? And you have to live as a PR for 1,095 days, right? But let's say you leave Canada during this time frame or during your stay here in Canada. So whatever the time you're going out of Canada, let's say you're out of Canada for 10 days, right? In the next 5 years or in the next 3 years, then basically that 10 days will be subtracted from this 10,095 days, or will not be added towards this criteria. So you have to be physically present in Canada for 1,095 days. That's very important. So whatever the dates you put in, like when you do the calculations for your physical presence in Canada, make sure to give it at least 10 to 15 days extra. This is what I did personally because if you just, follow the calculator and maybe do it on the same day, it may be okay, but it may not be okay as well because if you did if you if you did leave Canada in the last 5 years or in the last 3 years, then eh, I mean, for example, you forgot to enter a date or you did enter it incorrectly, then it could create a problem. Because once the IRCC verifies the information with the CBSA or once they look at your passport, if the dates are not correct, the application could be refused. So make sure you do put your maximum efforts in this, make sure you calculate it correctly. And even if you're meeting the criteria, just try to give it like 10, 15 days extra. That's very important, right? Now, this is very important again, filing income taxes. So if you have lived in Canada and you've been a Canadian resident for tax purposes, you need to make sure you're filing your income taxes. Okay. Now, when it comes to the income tax, Canada Revenue Agency is the one who administer the taxation laws. So you can always give them a call if you have doubts whether or not you're supposed to file taxes for a year, because if you have submitted your application and you live in Canada and you become non-resident, the rules are different. So make sure you check it with the Canada Revenue Agency. Now, let's one more example because a lot of people have asked me this question in the past as well. So, for example, if you're submitting a Canadian citizenship application in, let's assume, in February 2024, and it asks you to, basically tick if you're supposed to file your taxes. So your taxes wouldn't be due until April if you're employed, right? April of the following year, which is basically 2025 year. In May 2024, the taxes dates have already passed. So if you're filling out the application today, of course, and you're in Canada, you need to say yes and you need to file taxes accordingly before you submit your application. But the taxes for 2024 tax year wouldn't be due until 30th of April, right? So let's say you're submitting your application in Feb. So you would be required to file taxes, but you haven't filed taxes. Okay. So go ahead and make sure you provide that information correctly. And then once your taxes are filed, you can always raise a web form and update the IRCC. Okay. If you want to. Language skills are another important criteria. And this is very important to understand it again as well, that if you're between 18 and 54, and you must show that you have an adequate language of English or French. This means you can take part in short. So, I mean, you need to show CLB4. Okay, that's basically the Canadian language benchmark score you need to show, right? Um, Now, when you become PR, if you still have your old IELTS, you can use that as well. You don't have to go for the new testing, right? Now, the other thing you can do, this is actually kind of a really good information. You can always use this link, right, to see whether or not you need a IELTS exam or the CLB4, right? Because if you attended a post-secondary education in English, this can be an inside or outside of Canada. If you did, send a copy of proof that you completed attending a program with your proof can be diploma transcript certification, right? So even if you have completed education outside of Canada and you have diploma transcript certificate, as long as you complete that education outside of Canada or in Canada, you just make sure you submit that information, like a actual degree transcript or certificate, right? And then you don't need to go for the IELTS exam or you don't have to provide a proof of language like CLB4. Okay. So that's all about the English testing or English requirements. Now, the next important thing is to pass a citizenship test. I've I've made a video, like I mentioned earlier. I made a video on a citizenship test as well, how you can prepare for it. So make sure you go ahead and check it out if you have any questions. But you must pass your citizenship test, okay? And you get 3 attempts, okay? And then after that, if you don't pass the test on the third attempt, then I think they're going to be scheduling for you for an interview. Now, of course, oath is actually another important aspect. I have already made a video on that, a detailed video. So make sure you go ahead and check it out as well. I'll try to add all these links in the description, but I've made a video on the oath ceremonies as well. Now you must take a oath if you're at least 14 years of age when you sign your application and we approve your application. So basically that's like very important. So if you're over the age of 14, then you must take the oath. And that's because it's one of the requirements for Canadian citizenship before they actually grant you citizenship, right? Now, a very important thing, make sure that when you are providing your information or when you're submitting your application, prohibitions if you committed a crime inside or outside of Canada, you may not be eligible to become a Canadian citizen for a period of time. And that will, again, that will all vary. There's actually a detail of information. We'll just try to go through that as well. So make sure time spent in a term of imprisonment or parole or probation does not count as the time you lived in Canada. So very important information. This should make sure you follow this as well. Okay. Um, Now, if you have any criminal background, I don't want to go too much of details because there are different rules and requirements for this. So I'm just basically giving an idea. If you have any criminal backgrounds and you have served any imprisonment, make sure you disclose that information. Otherwise, the government will find out themselves, but make sure you disclose it yourself, okay? Now, okay, so now a few more things we're just going to go through in details. So just make sure that these are kind of situations that may prevent you becoming Canadian citizenship. So make sure you go through that as well. It's mainly about the criminal history. And if you have, like any type, you have submitted any application for Canadian citizenship where you were found, where you misrepresented, you were refused misrepresentation in the 5 years, the application could be refused. Okay. So make sure you go through this detailed checklist. This is very important. And if you are unsure about any of the situation that's not mentioned here, make sure you contact an RCC registered lawyer. I mean, like the RCRC consultant or police officer. Like for example, if you had any criminal activities, make sure you get their advice or opinion, right, about the situation you're not about the case or the scenario you're not confirmed or you're not sure about it. So make sure you do speak to them. Okay. Now, okay, so these are the main thing I wanted to, make it clear that the eligibility criteria is very important, right? Now, let's quickly talk about the documents, right? Because document submission is another important aspect. So this is the physical presence calculator I was talking about. One thing I forgot to mention here that you cannot meet the physical presence requirement without a minimum of 2 years as a PR, as a permanent resident of Canada. So that's very important to understand that if you've lived as a temporary resident and you just became a PR, you need to make sure that you do live in Canada as a PR before you apply for Canadian citizenship, right? So basically, you cannot meet the physical presence requirement without a minimum of 2 years as a PR. So 1 year could only be counted from your status as a TR in the past, right? Like a temporary status. For example, if you're a student or if you're on a work permit, right? Now let's talk about the document checklist, okay? So very important things, right? So make sure you do follow this guide. This is very, very comprehensive guide. Now, once you have calculated your physical presence, I have already made a video how you can submit an online application. You can go through that as well. Now, you need to make sure because this is very common mistake. I've seen a lot of people what they do actually. So you need to submit your passport copies, right? So make sure you do submit, of course, the bio pages, like the first and second pages as well. But it's always advised, like I've seen cases where people just submitting first and second page of their passport, and then later on the immigration officer, the citizenship processing officer asking them to provide like the full, like like the whole page, whole books of your, like whole pages of your passport, whatever the pages you have, right? Like for example 30, 36 page. So make sure you scan each page of your passport during a, so whatever the passport you have, you've held or you've had. So make sure you're submitting the whole pages, color copies, the photocopies of all pages, valid or expired, doesn't matter. Any travel documents you had in the last 5 years, if it's one passport, two passport, make sure you scan everything and then submit it all, right? The reason for that is they need to make sure, they go through the stamps to see when you left Canada and when you entered Canada again, right? To make sure you do meet the criteria, and then of course they will definitely validate, or they do validate this information with the CBSA as well. Now, photocopies of two pieces of personal identification, and this could be one could be your passport, um, the first and second pages that could be used, right? A PR card may only be used as a personal identification if your second piece of personal identification was issued by the Canadian government, driving license, health insurance card, senior citizenship, age of majority card, foreign identity documents such as passport and all that, right? So you need to provide photocopies of two pieces of personal identification, your actual passports, the whole copy scan, make sure. Photocopy of your proof of English. So if you are providing an IELTS, like I mentioned earlier, when you submit your PR application, if your IELTS has expired, go ahead and submit that. That's still acceptable. Or if you're submitting a Canadian degree or any education you complete in Canada that was completed in English, make sure you submit that. Even if you complete it outside of Canada, make sure you upload the actual transcript, degree, diploma, certificate, confirming that you completed the education in English, right? Now, the other thing is if you're 18 and 50 years of age and able to demonstrate that you have necessary English or French ability due to compassionate grounds submitting supporting documents, that's another situation where you can't pass the test. You can, because they have so many people, right? They can't speak English, they don't have any kind of education in English. Then it's kind of that situation, but I'm not going to go into too much of that details, right? So make sure your application is complete. So you need to make sure that you have a two identical citizenship photos. You can go through the requirements here. Fee receipts, make sure your fees are paid correctly. And this is kind of a checklist, basically mainly for paper application, I believe. So like for example, your application, if you're submitting it online, there will be no separate pages. Physical presence calculation, that's another thing. You don't have to print it out when you're actually doing an online application. All pages of passport, English language proof, photocopy of two personal identification documents. This is what we already explained. Two identical citizenship photos. And when you're submitting an online application, of course, it will be uploaded online. Fee receipts. This is only applicable when you're sending a paper application. So, of course, when you do submit your application, you download the fee receipt and you upload it as well. Okay. Now, so this is kind of a checklist just to give you an idea. So you can just follow this guideline. And then accordingly, you can go ahead and fill your application, right? Now, this is another important information. These are different questions. When you fill out the application, it's give you like a whole lot of information. As long as you follow my previous video about the citizenship application, how to apply for Canadian citizenship application, you should be all good to go. So you should be all fine, right? So that's all about the Canadian citizenship application. And as long as you follow the instructions correctly, you should be able to submit your application, and you can eventually prevent, you just make sure you go through this checklist correctly to ensure the application is correct. Your application is correct and complete. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you like this video. Well, go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet. And I hope to see you in the next video very soon. Thanks for watching once again. Take care. Bye-bye.